Hello, Year 9 and 10. Welcome back to the plants topic. Today's lesson we are looking at what is photosynthesis. At the top of your page, as always, please can you put the driving question, which is what is photosynthesis, and also put the date. This is so that when you go back through your work, you can make sure that it goes in the right order, and actually it will make more sense when looking back over it. The key words for today's lesson are photosynthesis, of course, starch, glucose, carbon dioxide, and oxygen. These are reactants and products for the photosynthesis reaction. Exothermic, in fact, that should be endothermic as well. C6H12O6, these numbers should be in subscript. You'll see that again in a minute. Iodine, reactants and products. Again, so some of these words you will have used before, but then some of them will be new to you. By the end of the lesson, hopefully we'll be confident in using all of those. Right, why learn about plants? Well, you'll see the slide every single lesson. It's basically because we rely on them. Not only do we rely on plants for our food, so by understanding plants we are able to improve the yield of our crops, but also it is part of our ecosystem and environment that we obviously rely on and are part of as well. Your starter is to look at these pictures and use the clues to help come up with the word that is related to photosynthesis. So most of these are products or reactants from photosynthesis. One of them is required for photosynthesis. Please pause the video, and when you unpause, we'll go through what they represent. Okay, welcome back. The first one, nothing can burn without this gas. That is oxygen. Oxygen is a gas that is a chemical, is a gas that is required for burning and is also a product of photosynthesis. The main cause of global warming would be carbon dioxide, which is the link to photosynthesis. Photosynthesis requires CO2, carbon dioxide, as we did discuss last lesson. The type of sugar found in energy drinks, well, so I suppose you could have put fructose and sucrose, but I'm looking for glucose. Glucose with a G, you'll see how that's spelled in a second. Glucose is the point of photosynthesis, basically. It is the product that the plants are trying to make. So it's the most simple type of sugar. 2 hydrogens and 1 oxygen is H2O, also known as water. So H2 is because of the 2 hydrogens and the O for the oxygen. And the sun gives us this as well as heat. It's light. And light is important. Obviously, plants need light to survive, and that's because photosynthesis is an endothermic reaction and requires light. Right, using your quiz answers, fill in the gaps in the photosynthesis equation. It should look like this. The reactants, what you start with, are water and carbon dioxide, and the products are glucose and oxygen. In fact, the point of photosynthesis, the point of this chemical reaction that all plants do, is to make glucose. Underneath, we've got the symbol equation, and actually each one of these chemicals can be represented by the chemical formula as well. And so what we've got here is 6 waters, 6 H2Os, 6 carbon dioxides make C6H12O6, which is the chemical formula for glucose, and 6 oxygens as well. You do need to know the chemical reaction of photosynthesis. You do need to know the word equation. And later on, I may be asking you to remember what is the symbol equation. I suppose a tip here is that it's 6, 6, 6 for the smaller molecules. And the whole point of photosynthesis, as we'll cover again in a second, is glucose, which is C6H12O6. Light was one of the answers to the starter questions. It is necessary. Again, photosynthesis requires energy to work, and actually the light is captured by chlorophyll, which is in chloroplasts, which can be found in plant cells, especially those in the palisade mesophyll, if you remember from last lesson. especially those in the leaves of plants. Last lesson we looked at stomata, these looking bean things. If you zoomed in really close, if you looked very closely at the surface of a leaf, especially the bottom end of the leaf, you will see these stomata. You saw this slide. Stomata open to allow gas exchange, allowing carbon dioxide in and oxygen out. These are, well, carbon dioxide is a reactant and oxygen is a product of photosynthesis. We also saw this sentence. Photosynthesis is a chemical reaction that all plants do to make sugar. This is the point. If you take home anything from today's lesson, it is that the point of photosynthesis is for plants to make sugar. Okay, I've used this lightning bolt here, and you'll see it again in a bit, just to represent the fact that it requires light to happen. The arrow represents the fact that it's a chemical reaction. It shows that a reaction is happening, but it requires energy to do that. That slide. As it's a chemical reaction, and this, just like in chemistry, has reactants and products, you can kind of think of it in what chemicals does the plant start with and what chemicals does the plant end up with. The whole point of photosynthesis is glucose, so of course the product is glucose. Oxygen is actually a byproduct. The reactants are things that the plants do need, and so water is required by plants. We all know that plants need water, and carbon dioxide is the gas, and this is where the carbon comes from that builds the glucose molecules. So you can see there's 6 carbon atoms as the reactants, and those 6 carbon atoms go over to the glucose. So reactants are what the plant needs for photosynthesis, and the products are what is made by photosynthesis. It does feel a little bit daunting when you put it in when you talk about it in terms of the chemistry, I think. However, if you just think simply what is the point is to make glucose, then that's one of your products. And what do plants need? You know they need water and you know they need CO2 from last lesson. Then you've got most of the reaction there. Right, what is photosynthesis? Well, it is a chemical reaction that plants use to make their own food. Some of you will know that plants are usually the producers of an ecosystem. That means that they are the start of the food chains or the food webs. They are they're right at the very beginning. They are taking the energy from the sun and using it to make the chemical store of energy, using it to make sugar, which then other animals and us can use to for our own respiration. The word photosynthesis comes from the Greek language, photo meaning light and synthesis meaning put together. So photo, you will have heard that before, maybe in the word photograph. Photography, cameras require light to work, so that's why it's called a photograph. Synthesis means putting together. You might have heard of things like synthetic materials. So synthetic means made, man-made usually. So photosynthesis means putting together with light, and that's exactly what plants are doing. Okay, so although light is not included in the chemical reaction, is required because that's the energy that the plants use. We'll talk about that again in a bit. Right, where does photosynthesis happen? You know that it does happen in the leaves from last lesson. In fact, specifically, it happens in the chloroplast, which is an organelle. So the diagram on the right, you will see that you've got the epidermis, inside you've got the mesophyll, and these green dots inside the leaf cells are the chloroplasts. Okay, so the chloroplasts are specially designed organelles. Hopefully you will remember this from Key Stage 3. It is inside the cells where photosynthesis happens. Okay, so where does photosynthesis happen? Inside the cells, specifically in the chloroplasts. Which cells? Well, especially the leaf cells, but most parts of the plant that are green are green because they have chloroplasts in them. Okay, just like every lesson, I would like you to pause the video and have a read of this question and just decide which fits the answer the best. Which is the correct word equation for photosynthesis? Is it A, B, C, or D? Pause the video now. When you unpause, we'll go through the answers. Okay, welcome back. The answer is B. Water and carbon dioxide, the things that plants require and make glucose especially, and oxygen as a byproduct. B is the answer for the word equation for photosynthesis. Okay, what is the point? Well, it's all for the point of sugar. It's all for the point of making glucose. Okay, plants make their own food. They don't go out of their way to get their energy. They make it themselves in their leaves. And as we are scientists, we always like to be able to test these things. And so another thing that you need to know for the GCSE is, how do we know when photosynthesis is occurring? How can we test it? Well, there are lots of ways. As it's a chemical reaction, there's loads of things you can look at. One of the ways we're going to be exploring today, and you are going to have to remember, this is that starch, which is a key word for today's lesson, starch is produced. In fact, plants turn their glucose into starch. And so, if there's starch, then there must have been glucose made, and then there must have been photosynthesis. So, what is starch? Starch is made from glucose, and it is how the plant stores the glucose produced from photosynthesis. This quite scary looking diagram down here is a shortened version of what starch looks like. Each one of these units is a glucose molecule, and you can see it looks like they're kind of holding hands with each other. They're all joined up, and when it forms this bigger molecule, when they're all joined, that's called starch. Okay, now starch is insoluble. That means it doesn't dissolve, and that's obviously really useful for the plant to store its sugar. Otherwise, it might get washed away, if in the rain, for instance. You may have seen starch before. Perhaps if you're chopping potatoes, there's lots of starch in potatoes, and usually on your knife there would be this white kind of gunky film. That is actually starch. Also, it's in banana peels, I think. So I don't know if you've ever bitten a banana with its skin on and it makes your teeth feel horrible. That's starch doing that. So if starch is present, that means glucose must have been made. So photosynthesis must have happened. So how do we test for starch? It's using this chemical here, iodine. Now, some of you chemists may know that iodine is an element on the periodic table. When in a solution, it looks orange. It's got various medical uses, but is also a very useful test for starch. You will notice that it goes this dramatic black colour, dark blue or black, when it touches starch. So a drop of iodine on a potato will show that there is starch present by going yellowy brown orange to this dramatic dark black colour. So how can you tell whether photosynthesis has happened or not? Well, you put iodine on the leaf, and if it goes black, there is starch, so there was photosynthesis. If it doesn't go black, if it stays kind of that yellowy brown colour, then there was no starch present. You will have the opportunity to observe this, do this test yourself when we get back to the lab. For the time being, I just want to run you through how you would do this, because again, it is something that you do need to know for the GCSE, which is how would you go about the test for starch. So this is the step-by-step. One investigation that we could do is by putting black tape on a leaf, we can prevent some of the leaf from doing photosynthesis, but the rest of the leaf should carry on. And we're going to be able to test to see whether it has actually stopped photosynthesis from happening by testing for starch. So, step one, you boil the leaf. The reason you boil the leaf is because you then kill the leaf, and it will then stop doing any more chemical reactions. Nothing more is going to be produced, nothing more is going to be used up, and it just stops all those chemical reactions because you've killed the leaf. Boil it, literally just like you might on the hob if you were cooking spinach or something. Next, you have to boil it in ethanol, or at least put it in hot ethanol. Now, some of you will know ethanol is a type of alcohol, and what it does is it removes the chlorophyll from the leaf. Chlorophyll gives leaves its green color, so once you've put it in ethanol, hot ethanol, it changes the color of the leaf and makes it go really pale. This is really useful because the test that we're doing is a color change, and it will allow us to see the color change a lot better. So once we've killed the leaf, we put it in hot ethanol to remove the chlorophyll, and then put it on a tile or something, put the iodine on it, and you should be able to see that where there was photosynthesis, it will go dark blue or black, and where there wasn't photosynthesis, so for instance over the black tape, it will stay this pale colour, perhaps yellowy brown, because of the iodine. So in summary, first you place the leaf in boiling water to kill it and stop the chemical reactions. Step 2, you place the leaf in boiling ethanol. This removes the chlorophyll and makes the leaf paler. 3, you spread the leaf onto a white tile, easy for you to see, and then you add iodine to test for the presence of starch. Now, what would that test look like? You can say it goes from yellowy brown to black. You do need to know the point of the stages, especially 1, 2, and 4. You need to know that iodine is the test for starch, but you also need to know that you must boil the leaf first, and then you put it in ethanol to remove the chlorophyll. Okay, so quick test. Would you please pause the video and try to put these in order? Again, you don't need to write the answers down, but perhaps on a piece of paper, you can just write the A, B, C, or D in that right order. Okay, pause the video and we'll go through the answers in just a second. Okay, welcome back. B comes first. First, you boil the leaf in water to kill it. Then D, you place the leaf in a hot ethanol to remove the chlorophyll. Then A, you spread the leaf onto a white tile. And then C, you add iodine to see if it goes black. If it goes black, starch is present. Okay, now's the time of the lesson where normally I would ask you to turn to your partner and discuss this question out loud by articulating your answers out loud. It really does help you organize your thoughts. But unfortunately, we aren't in the lab, so what I'd like you to do now is to have a look at this question, pause the video, and go find somebody in your house and tell them the answer, literally out loud. Stop them from doing what they're doing and tell them. It could be your mum or dad, it could be brother, sister, it could be your neighbor over the fence, it could be your pet. Okay, but I would like you to tell them, how could you use iodine to test if photosynthesis has happened? Once you come back, we'll go through the answer. Okay, go. Okay, welcome back. Hopefully that you've had a nice conversation about plants and iodine and things. This would be my answer. Well, first, we know that iodine goes from yellow-brown to black in the presence of starch. We know that starch is made from glucose, and glucose is made by photosynthesis. So, if iodine goes black, then photosynthesis has happened. It has happened to make the glucose, which makes the starch. Okay, so we've already seen this slide before. We know that water plus carbon dioxide makes glucose and oxygen. And I use this this lightning bolt to show that it requires energy. Okay, so far we've talked about the reactants and the products, but we could also describe this reaction as an endothermic reaction. Okay, so those of you in year 10 may have come across the term endothermic before. Those of you in year 9 probably haven't. Now, an endothermic reaction, in essence, is a reaction that requires energy. The opposite is an exothermic reaction, which gives out energy. So something like combustion, burning, is an exothermic reaction as it gives out heat and light, whereas photosynthesis is an example of an endothermic reaction, as it requires energy. What is the kind of energy that it requires? It's light. An endothermic reaction requires energy to happen, and it is light, the energy in the form of light, that plants use to make this happen. Okay, now it's time for the writing phase as always. So please can you make sure that your answers are in full sentences and in paragraph form, and one by one, making sure that you've got your driving question at the top of the page. I'd like you to work your way through from the describe to the explain to the use to the combine answer at the end. Please do use the keywords at the bottom and start off with your describe section. So the describe question is, describe what is needed for photosynthesis and where in the plant cell does it take place. Simple sentences will do. 2, the explain question is explain why plant leaves contain starch and write a word equation for photosynthesis. The use is explain how to test a leaf for starch. Remember those stages that we've discussed before. And write a symbol equation for photosynthesis. And finally, explain why photosynthesis is called an endothermic reaction, even though therm means heat. So what does an endothermic reaction mean, and why is photosynthesis one of those? Okay, give yourself about 10 to 15 minutes on this. Please pause the video now to do that, and once you come back, we'll go through the answers. Okay, thank you very much for your 9 and 10. Welcome back. Let's have a look. As always, we're going to be marking our answers. Please use a different colour pen. Doesn't have to be green like we do using the class, but as long as you've got some other colour pen, so it's very obvious that when you look back at your work that you've had a go at not only giving yourself ticks, but also that you're able to edit and correct and add bits to your work, because that is actually very impressive to be able to edit your own work. So first of all, question 1. Photosynthesis takes place in the chloroplasts, especially in the palisade cells, you could add, but they are in the cells in the chloroplasts. The reactants are water and carbon dioxide, but it also requires light to happen. The explain task. Plant leaves contain starch because it is one way how plants store the glucose that they produce from photosynthesis. Starch is insoluble in water and therefore a better store of chemical energy than soluble glucose. So that's why. And the word equation, hopefully you can do this from memory now. Water plus carbon dioxide makes glucose and oxygen. If you didn't get this, I recommend just writing it out a couple of times, cover it up, write it out a couple of times. It will crop up in the rest of for the rest of biology. It's probably one of the most important chemical reactions. That one and respiration, most important chemical reactions in all of biology. So you do need to memorize this. Water plus carbon dioxide is glucose and oxygen. The U section, iodine turns from orangey brown or yellowy brown to black in the presence of starch. And the symbol equation, can I draw on this? I've made a mistake here. Is 6. Please make sure you've got 6 H2Os plus 6 CO2s makes 1 C6H12O6, this is glucose, and 6 O2s. Can I not write on this? It's a pain. So there we are. And the combined section says that photosynthesis is an endothermic reaction because it needs energy to happen. Exothermic reactions give out energy, whereas endothermic requires energy. In many chemical reactions, the energy required is in the form of thermal energy, but in this case, it's required in the form of light energy. So as long as you said that photosynthesis requires energy and it requires light, that will do for your combine section for today. Right, as always, can you please write your today I have achieved sentence? Can you use the word describe, explain, use, or combine to fill in this section here? And actually, once you've written because I can, use the full sentences to say what skills you've used and what have you actually done for today's lesson. And then you can have a think about what grade that's worth. So for instance, lots of you who are aiming for a grade 6 might say, today I've achieved a use because I can explain how to test a leaf for starch and write a symbol equation for photosynthesis. Okay, please can you pause the video now and just write your "today I achieved" sentence. Okay, marvelous. Thank you so much for your work today, year 9 and 10. As always, there is a 10-question show my homework quiz. Can you do that? That will let us know that you. It will also be quite a nice test just to see what you can remember from today's lesson. Okay, thank you very much, guys. See you next time. Bye for now.